Ever since the days of the Flintstones, sitcoms and animation have gone together like peanut butter and chocolate, with some of the highest rated television programs in history falling into that category. While Fred and Wilma opened the door for what was possible, The Simpsons broke even more ground by producing a cartoon that was not necessarily intended for all ages. Ever since then, adult animated sitcoms have remained prominent in pop culture, with the male heads of their households ranking among the most prolific characters to ever exist. This has led us to consider which fathers are the most intelligent and which ones have crayons lodged in their brains, either literally or figuratively. I'm Keefe Nossi with Wicked Binge, and this is Adult Animated Sitcom Dads, Dumb to Brilliant. Today we're starting our list with the dumbest of the dads and working our way up to the smartest. This category is the dumb dads. The gold medal of stupidity is awarded to none other than the Family Guy himself, Peter Griffin. We're not going to act like this was a hard choice, even with the number of dim-witted fathers we've seen on television. Similarly to Homer Simpson before him, some would argue too similarly, Peter's stupidity is one of the driving forces that makes the Fox/Disney show so iconic and memorable. Initially portrayed as a dim-witted father with somewhat of a good heart, Peter's idiocy has become more in your face and obnoxious as the series has progressed. Peter has the mentality of a child, often picking on Meg as if he were a high school bully. In the season 4 episode Pete-Hearted, Peter takes an IQ test to find out he's actually mentally handicapped. That does go far in explaining some of his behavior, although we say that's merely scratching the surface. Peter's behavior is so aggressively stupid that he often ends up accidentally putting himself and his family into perilous circumstances, even more so than Stewie, who is actively trying to kill his own mother. We could go on and on and on, but watch 5 minutes of any Family Guy episode and you'll understand why Peter takes home the gold trophy here. The silver medal is awarded to probably the most iconic dim-witted dad ever, Homer Simpson. Even though Peter may be taking home the gold, we can't forget that Homer was the one who laid the groundwork for Peter's antics, as well as the antics of most other characters on this list. Much like his Family Guy counterpart, Homer started off as a somewhat oblivious father who has only gotten dumber as the series has progressed. This, once again, was eventually explained in the season 9 episode Homer, where it turns out that Homer has had a crayon lodged in his brain since he was 6 years old. We could point out specific examples of Homer's dumb moments, but any Simpsons fan knows this list would be long and plentiful.
I think it's turning my skin yellow.
The influence of Homer's stupidity is still being felt in society today. Homer definitely deserves a spot this high up for how groundbreaking his lack of intelligence has been, both on The Simpsons itself and in the cartoon world in general. We're giving the bronze medal of dumbness to Eric Duckman. The titular character featured in the series of the same name, Duckman is a private dick and family man who is phenomenally bad at both roles. Despite his occupation, Duckman is an incompetent detective who rarely gets clients at his agency. Any good that does come out of his business is usually the result of his partner, Corn-Fed Pig, who is highly intelligent and competent in contrast to Duckman.
Where the hell's my car freshener?
Quite possibly the loudest character on this list, Duckman is defined not only by his incompetence, but also his explosive anger, which often causes him to lash out in violent ways. An idiot is one thing, but a violent idiot is something to beware at all costs. As oblivious, misguided, and downright moronic as Duckman is, we still consider him more intelligent than Homer and Peter due to moments where Duckman does have self-awareness. It's also strongly implied that Duckman's attitude stems from the depression he feels due to the loss of his wife Beatrice, which caused him to become miserable and isolated. This may go far in explaining why Duckman misses certain social cues, but it doesn't make his actions any less idiotic in the moment. Traveling back to the medieval ages, next we have King Zog Grunkwitz from Disenchantment. Defined by his royal status, King Zog is a selfish and tyrannical leader who's much more respected for his brawn than his brains. He has an inflated ego due to his position, even though his followers are loyal to him more out of fear than genuine respect. King Zog lives in denial and practically asks his people to lie to him, so long as the lie is something he would want to hear. There are moments when he's self-aware, such as when he admits that Bean's misery and rebellious nature are a result of his inability to connect with her, but he doesn't try to find a way to resolve this issue. Instead, King Zog deals with all of his issues by yelling, even when that obviously isn't the best method to use, nor even a good method at all. Throughout the series, King Zog's mental state has gone from bad to worse, as he was sent to the Twinkletown Insane Asylum after experiencing many traumatic events. He eventually escapes, which does demonstrate some level of competence on his part, despite his mind likely still being highly disturbed. With the bottom of the barrel covered, let's move on to the mixed bag category. These are dads who have definite moments of stupidity, but could be considered intelligent in some ways. Moving on to our first Adult Swim father, Clay Puppington is up next. This is a character whose intelligence is very hard to rank Frank due to how much Clay likes to live in denial of the world around him. Ever since childhood, Clay has been experiencing many traumatic events which eventually lead to him becoming a miserable, jaded alcoholic who's verbally abusive to his wife and physically abusive to his son. He tends to act superior to everyone around him, even though his deep-rooted insecurities prove this to be a coping mechanism. Clay often teaches Oral various lessons in his study after the kid gets himself into trouble. That would be fine, except the lessons are often warped, hypocritical, and missing the point of what Oral should have been punished for in the first place. Clay likes to present himself as a competent, upstanding individual, but the majority of Marlton residents are able to see through this facade. We can't exactly say he's stupid because he does seem to be self-aware deep down, but we're putting him on the lower end of the list due to his mask of intelligence not being very effective. Another character who stays in a constant state of denial is Frank Murphy from F is for Family. A jaded, bitter, and abusive man, Frank is much more bluntly cynical than Clay, even though his problems also stem from an abusive childhood. Before his marriage, Frank was much more upbeat and optimistic, thinking he had the whole world in his hand. Eventually, his inability to fit into society caught up to him, leading Frank into becoming the man that he currently is.
Trust me, this'll pass.
Frank's denial comes from the fact that he claims to love his family despite the fact that he always abuses them and blames them for his problems. In reality, Frank is afraid to face the fact that he ended up like his father, a cynical abuser who takes his problems out on his kids. Frank displays a strong lack of emotional and professional intelligence, both of which have repercussions on himself as well as those around him. Up next is Jerry Smith from Rick and Morty. Now, we have to be specific as to which Jerry we're talking about here, as the original Jerry that was seen in Rick and Morty was eventually replaced by a new one when Rick and Morty traveled to a new dimension. Since the original Jerry is technically the biological father to the Morty that the show follows, we're going to be talking about that Jerry. This Jerry, also known as Jerry Smith Prime, started out as a bumbling, insecure father like most of the other Jerrys. This all changed in the episode Rick Potion number 9, wherein Rick mutated the entire human population into becoming Cronenbergs. This change prompted Jerry to become much braver and more dedicated to his family, primarily to protect them from the mutated creatures. This change in Jerry's personality is why he ranks a little higher in the intellect department than the current Jerry probably would. Jerry Prime's survival instincts do prove to be quite impressive, even if he does eventually die at the hands of Rick. Now let's take a look at Daria's father, Jake Morgendorffer. Much like Clay and Frank, Jake's past is filled with traumatic events, which led to him having issues with anger. Even so, Jake does genuinely care about his family and tries to maintain an optimistic attitude, as hard as that may be for him. Jake spends most of his time avoiding conflict amongst his family, causing him to be somewhat distant. This makes it very clear that while Jake is a competent, working professional, his emotional intelligence toward himself and everyone around him is quite low.
Oh, hey, kiddo.
He might also be possibly schizophrenic given his tendency to scream at things that aren't really there. It's no secret that Daria's cynical view of the world around her stems from the lack of respect she has toward members of her family, particularly what she deems as a lack of intellect. While we wouldn't consider Jake a total imbecile, we do understand why Daria feels this way. Another character who has really conflicting levels of intelligence is Randy Marsh from South Park. For a long time in the series, Randy was portrayed as a prototypical father who was occasionally dim-witted but also was a professional and competent geologist with a doctorate. As the series has progressed, Randy's role has increased dramatically, leading to moments of him demonstrating great intelligence and great stupidity. Randy's biggest detriment is his tendency to jump on trends, leading him to often act impulsive, immature, and selfishly. It was revealed in the episode You're Getting Old that Randy often acts this way due to a deep-seated unhappiness that he feels in his marriage.
Yeah, right.
While this was a rare moment of self-reflection, it didn't stop Randy from jumping on trends and annoying his family afterward, especially when he started up Tegrity Farms. While this did show how oblivious Randy was to his family's feelings, his marijuana business did do very well, showing Randy's competence as an entrepreneur. The amount of intellect Randy demonstrates is balanced out by his level of stupidity, making for a very dynamic character. Next, we're taking a look at Bob Oblong. The Oblongs was a show featuring a low-income family mutated by toxic waste coming from a rich neighborhood known as The Hills. Despite their unfortunate position, the Oblongs generally maintain a happy-go-lucky attitude, with Bob Oblong being the most positive of all. Bob has no arms nor legs, leading to him to use his mouth to perform most tasks. Despite this, not only is Bob able to get around without much trouble, but he's also a considerably competent worker. Bob's accomplishments, despite his shortcomings, are admirable, but we do have to knock him some points for his general naivete. He works at a literal poison factory called Globocide, which exploits its workers as well as damages the environment around them. While Bob's positive attitude is certainly admirable, it does lead to some oversights in terms of his intelligence. Stan Smith shoots his way into the next spot. The titular American dad, Stan, much like Randy, is a character who is very balanced in terms of his intelligence. He's very competent in some areas, including his position as a CIA field agent and weapons expert. Stan is always ready for action, making him a very reliable father in terms of protecting his family. However, Stan has a hard time turning his mind off of work mode, thus leading to him having low emotional intelligence. Despite loving his family, Stan is often oblivious to their feelings, leading them to be hurt by his actions.
You're a gardener.
Stan often does learn the error of his ways, which has led to him becoming more emotionally aware in recent seasons. This is a stark contrast to Peter or Homer, who gradually became dumber as their series continued. Stan certainly does still have some less favorable characteristics, such as his xenophobia and overly masculine image of himself, but we applaud him for trying to improve himself. The final Seth MacFarlane character to appear on this list. Next, we're looking at Cleveland Brown. Initially appearing as a supporting character on Family Guy, Cleveland eventually stepped into the spotlight himself with the conception of The Cleveland Show. As a friend of Peter, Cleveland was often seen as the most intelligent member of the group. Sure, he wasn't as heroic as Joe, nor, I guess, knew his way around women like Quagmire, but Cleveland often was portrayed as much calmer and more rational than the other three.
But I'm 2 days from retirement.
Cleveland maintained his personality throughout both Family Guy and The Cleveland Show, making him one of the more competent father figures to have appeared on Fox up until that point. Cleveland barely misses out on the intelligence section, as his passiveness does sometimes lead to him putting up with bad situations longer than he should, such as Peter continuously destroying the front wall of his house. If Cleveland stuck up for himself more, we'd actually rank him as a very competent father figure. Now we're moving on to the smart to brilliant section. These are fathers who we consider to have the most brains when it comes to animated sitcoms. Let's start this section off by talking about Bob Belcher. A self-made man who runs his own burger joint, Bob is almost always portrayed as passionate, competent, and dedicated to both his store and his family. He shows great appreciation to his customers and is welcoming to anyone regardless of their race, gender orientation, or occupation. Bob does have a tendency to be a little bit too uptight, which is greatly contrasted by the attitudes of Linda and their 3 children. This does cause Bob to occasionally make rash decisions, especially toward Jimmy Pesto, who often mocks and berates him. Despite this, Bob is certainly capable of showing restraint before he goes too far at getting back at his restaurant rival. Bob's sensible nature usually balances out the rest of the cast's zany antics, making him a great straight man for this series. Hank Hill is taking home the bronze medal of intelligence. And I tell you what, whereas Homer opened the door for animated fathers to be lazy, stupid, and incompetent, Hank set a different kind of standard. Instead, Hank is hardworking, highly proficient, and abides by his morals very strongly, possibly making him the cartoon dad with the largest amount of integrity. Everyone else in Hank's neighborhood always goes to him whenever they need advice or to solve a dispute. They rightfully look up to him as the most moral and competent man on the block, even if he does have a tendency to be uptight and irritable. Hank, much like many other characters on this list, had a troubled childhood due to always being yelled at and berated by his father, Cotton. The difference here is that Hank has seemingly adjusted quite well in his adulthood and doesn't live in a constant state of denial. He is a redneck to a certain degree, but anyone who thinks that makes him inherently stupid has a mind narrower than Hank's urethra. Taking home the silver medal is none other than Dr. Jonathan Katz. As the title of his show says, Dr. Katz is a professional therapist who dedicates his life to helping others deal with their problems. It just so happens that his clientele happens to be comprised of stand-up comedians who tell him long, drawn-out stories. Despite this, Dr. Katz treats everyone he talks to with the utmost respect and concern, never losing his patience with them in the process. These are all traits which make for an outstanding therapist, which is likely why Dr. Katz has such a vast array of people seeking out his help. Dr. Katz's only real flaw is that he can be a bit too easygoing, especially with his son Ben, who is 24, unemployed, and has no future prospects. This shows that Jonathan could, and probably should, be pushing his son a little harder in life, but at least the two have a very loving relationship regardless. Finally, the Gold Medal of Brilliance is awarded to none other than Dr. Thaddeus Venture, also known as Rusty. The father to the titular Venture brothers, Hank and Dean, Rusty is an accomplished scientist who lives in the shadow of his own scientist father. Despite never reaching the same celebrity status as Jonas, Dr. Venture is very brilliant in his own right, creating mind-bending inventions that stand on their own as amazing creations. We do admit that Rusty isn't as smart socially, as he often misunderstands the feelings of those around him. Even so, Rusty kind of shows he does care about his family's well-being, going as far as to clone Dean and Hank in response to their many deaths. Dr. Venture is rude, condescending, and somewhat careless, so we won't act like he's about to win any Father of the Year awards. In terms of pure intelligence, though, we do think Rusty deserves the gold for his outstanding work in his field. Let us know in the comments section if you agree with our ranking, and tell us what we should cover next. Remember to hit that notification bell and binge our Dumb to Brilliant playlist, where we break down the intelligence of your favorite characters. But most importantly, stay wicked.